Ready for some practice. We just read Exercise Your Mind, and now we're going to be looking for claims, reasons, and evidence, but it's going to look a little bit different than it has in the past. Let's go ahead and look. Our first box, what we're first asked to do is find the main point the author is trying to make. So if we're thinking of claims, reasons, and evidence, this is the claim. What claim is the author making? And we normally find that at the beginning. Normally authors, when they're trying to persuade you, they give you their opinion, their thought, what they're wanting you to believe pretty early on. So if we look here in the very first paragraph, most of it is talking about exercising your brain, right? And if you don't exercise your brain, it's harder and harder to do challenging things. So I'm not going to copy and paste necessarily a sentence from this text, but I would say that the author's point is that you should exercise your brain. So I'm going to type that up here. Should exercise your brain. Okay, so we've got our claim. That means that everything else that we're going to do down here has to connect back to the claim that you should exercise your brain. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to look for the reasons and evidence that back that up. So let's look for a supporting reason. And one thing that good authors of persuasive writing do is that they normally split their paragraphs up into their reasons. And if I look back in my reading, I've got 3 different paragraphs after the initial paragraph. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look in this first paragraph, or I'm sorry, really the second paragraph after the introductory paragraph, and see if I can find a reason. So it says, reading is one of the best ways to exercise your brain. Researchers at Emory University have found that when you read a book, you don't only imagine yourself in the setting, but your brain really reacts as if you're in the book. Reading opens up the brain's sensory processing areas. In other words, when you read, your 5 senses are working. Your brain works to see, smell, hear, taste, and feel whatever the book describes. Your brain is unable to tell the difference between reading about an experience and having the experience. By reading different types of books, you encourage your brain to experience new things. I think really that last sentence pretty much sums up a reason. So you should exercise your brain by reading. Really, as I'm reading through this, I feel like that's more of the main point. So I think I'm going to add that. You should exercise your brain by reading, because pretty much everything that we cover has to do with reading. I'm going to make this text just a little bit smaller. That's better. Okay. So the first reason, if I look back up here, is that reading different type of books encourages your brain to experience new things. So that's what I'm going to put as my reason here. Reading new types of books. How do I want to say that? Encourages, I'm not going to change that too much. Encourages your brain to experience new things. Again, I'm going to make that smaller. Okay. So that's a reason. So why should we exercise our brain by reading? Because reading new types of books encourages your brain to experience new things. That's one really good way to check. Does my reason match with my main point? Is putting them in the same sentence and adding because in there, because your reason should tell why this is, your claim. Okay, so I've got part of that done. Now I'm looking for evidence. So I'm going to use yellow in the text to highlight any evidence. So remember, evidence has to be a fact, and it has to support your reason. So reading new types of books encourages your brain. So if I look back in here, I think they talk about a research. So researchers at Emory University have found that when you read a book, you don't only imagine yourself in the setting, but your brain really reacts to the book. I think that's perfect evidence. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to use my highlight, and I'm going to highlight that sentence where it talks about researchers at Emory University. And that's one thing that helps me realize that this is a fact, because it's citing its source, saying that the researchers from Emory University have found this. It also says reading opens up your brain's sensory processing area. I'm going to add that too, because I just like that fact. Good. Okay, so I now have and I'm going to let me find my highlighter. And I'm going to highlight this yellow just to remind myself, okay, I got that one. So I have my main point, I have my first reason, and my first piece of evidence. So let's go on to the next one. So we're doing the exact same thing, but we're finding a second reason and evidence. So I'm going to go to the third paragraph. Reading exercises your brain in new ways every time. The left temporal cortex is the language area of the brain. When you watch TV, words pass by your brain without stopping at the left temporal lobe. Books are different because they do something more. When reading, the left temporal cortex pulls together all of thoughts, feelings, and memories you have with that word. So I would say the reason here is that reading exercises your brain in new ways every time. So I'm going to add that to my evidence. So reading exercises. I'm not going to get exercises apparently. Your brain in new ways every time. So I'm going to double check and make sure that that's okay as a reason. So you should exercise your brain by reading. Why? Because reading exercises your brain in new ways every time. So that sounds like a good reason. Let's find some evidence to support that. So we're going to switch to green. Remember, evidence means that we're going to have a fact. So let's see. The left temporal cortex is the language area. And when reading, the left temporal cortex pulls together all of the thoughts, feelings, and memories you have with that word. So I like that last sentence. We can prove that, right? We know it's a fact. We could prove that your left temporal cortex pulls together. That's like what that does. That's a language area of your brain. I might even highlight that sentence too, that it's the left. It's the language center. And then I'm going to go back here. I'm going to highlight this in green so I know that I've got it finished. So now I've got my, maybe not. There we go. There's my green. I've got my first reason and evidence, second reason and evidence, and now I'm going to find my third reason and evidence. Make sure that I've got it back there. Okay, so I'm going to go to that last paragraph. So researchers at Lund University studied the effects of reading challenging text. They had adult subjects read medical text for 3 months. Then the researchers scanned the subject's brain. Do you know what happened? Their brains grew. Their left temporal cortexes got bigger. This shows that their understanding of language got better. So this one doesn't have necessarily a sentence that I want to use. It's got a lot of good research, a lot of good evidence. How do I want to say this, though? That reading challenging things makes your brain grow, right? I think that's the reason I'm going to use here. So reading challenging text helps your brain grow. This is something that I think a lot of people don't like to do. Nobody loves to do things that are really, really difficult for you, especially at first, right? But this is kind of convincing to me. This almost makes me want to read things that are a little bit more difficult to know that my brain could grow, especially where they say that adults were doing this. So that as an adult, that makes me feel like, ooh, even as an adult, I could work out my brain and make it grow. So let's see, I've got blue as my last one. We're going to look for evidence. We have a lot of evidence here. So researchers, let me get my blue. Researchers at Lund University studied the effect of reading a challenging text. I'm going to keep going. They had adults read medical texts for 3 months and then scanned their brains, and it shows that their brains grew. So I'm going to skip that one. Did you know what happened? Because that's not necessarily the evidence. That's just kind of a bridge between here's the study and here's what happened. I even like this too. The left temporal lobe got bigger. All of those facts, things that we could prove, right? So I've got my blue. Let's go back in here and choose highlighter and blue. There we go. Okay, I'm going to double check this one more time just to make sure. So first off, what's the main point that my author is trying to prove is that you should exercise your brain by reading. Also notice that I added the by reading after I read for a little bit. That's fine. You can change these around. They can be a work in progress. You don't have to have the right answer right off the bat. We can always change them. Why should you exercise your brain by reading? Reading new types of books encourages your brain to experience new things. That sounds good. Why should you exercise your brain by reading? Because reading exercises your brain in new ways every time. And then why should you exercise your brain by reading? Because reading challenging texts helps your brain grow. And if I look back in my text, I've got my 3 sections of evidence. So I am good to go. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to submit it on Canvas. We're going to do another practice one like this tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we're actually going to take a quiz that's going to look exactly like this. You're going to have a new text to read, and you're going to find the main point, 3 reasons, and 3 pieces of evidence. So this was good practice today. Make sure that you submit this because I am going to take this for a grade. If you're not sure, especially if you're doing this at home or if you're doing this as makeup work, and you have a question about why I did what I did, please come ask me so that way I can explain it to you before we get in ready for the quiz. So good luck. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to do this. If you need a minute or if you need to go back and pause the video, I know I was going kind of fast to type in some of the answers. If you were listening and not typing, that's fine. Other than that, do it to it.